All right, good evening. This is Chair Justin Cooley, and I would like to call this regular meeting at the Planning Commission to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would Deputy City Clerk Megan Wilbanks please call roll?
Commissioner Flores?
Here.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Here.
Commissioners Khan, Munoz Morris, and Tully will be absent tonight. Vice Chair Houghton?
I'm here.
And Chair Cooley.
Here. At this time, we will hear any public comment for items not on tonight's agenda. Items raised are generally referred to staff, and if action by the commission is necessary, may be scheduled for a future meeting. City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't received any speaker slips. We've got some folks joining us in the audience, so if anybody did want to speak on non-agenda public comment, could you please indicate? Okay, and in the future, if you do want to speak for the public hearing item, we have speaker slips located behind me or just out the door. So if you could fill those out and turn it in, that's really helpful.
All right, it appears we have no non-agenda public comment, so that brings us to our consent. The only item on consent tonight is consideration of our minutes from the September 11th, 2024 meeting. Before I call for a vote, do any commissioners have any comments on consent? Seeing no comments, do we have a motion and a second to approve?
I will move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say no. All right. We have approved consent. That brings us to our public hearing portion of the agenda. Any court challenge to the action taken on public hearing items on this agenda may be limited to considering only those issues raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the City of San Luis Obispo at or prior to the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please give your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. So item 4A is the public hearing to review proposed street abandonment and detachment applications to accommodate a new Cal Poly faculty and staff housing development and correct historical boundary crossings on Slack Street and Hathaway. With Senior Planner Callie Taylor, please present the staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. So tonight we are going to review a street abandonment and detachment application. The applications were submitted by Cal Poly University. The location is on Slack Street and Hathaway, and it's a project known as Vista Meadows. Tonight, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt the draft resolution. It's attachment A in your agenda report. And this resolution finds that the right-of-way abandonment and detachment are consistent with the general plan. It considers any constraints or conditions necessary for the street abandonment, and conditions are included in your draft resolution. And it recommends that the City Council approve the abandonment and the detachment applications on Slack Street and Hathaway, subject to findings and conditions of approval. A little bit of background and project description for you. Cal Poly is requesting this right-of-way abandonment.
May I just interrupt for a second? Is there any way for us to recenter the slides so they can be read?
Oh, sure. Is it?
Oh, there it is. Looks like we got it.
Okay. Is that showing up? Okay. Is it showing on your screen correctly? Okay. All right. So Cal Poly is going to be building a 33-unit staff and faculty housing project. This is at the northeast corner of Slack and Grand. Currently, Slack Street has a 70-foot right-of-way. This is fairly wide for a local residential street. Cal Poly is proposing to widen the pavement and then install a sidewalk on the north side of the Slack Street frontage in front of the new housing. They are requesting that the city abandon the unused portions of the remaining right-of-way. There is a corresponding city limit modification. It's known as a detachment. It's kind of opposite of an annexation, and that's to match the new right-of-way along Slack Street. There are some additional right-of-way abandonment and city limit cleanup areas that are described in your staff report. These are for areas west of Grand and on Hathaway, and these are to correct historical boundary inconsistencies. The Vista Meadows housing project itself is located outside of city limits. It's on state land owned by Cal Poly. So the housing project itself is not under consideration by the Planning Commission. Only the portions of improvements proposed within the city right-of-way are within the city's jurisdiction. This is a map of the areas under consideration tonight. So in red, you see the Cal Poly faculty housing project. That's about 8.5 acres on that northeast corner of Slack and Grand. The street abandonment and detachment extend along the east side of Grand and the west side of Grand on Slack Street. And so that is all included along one linear portion of Slack Street. The other parcel that we're looking at is a 3-acre parcel on Hathaway, and that was an inconsistency that LAFCO identified as a good area to clean up because it's located within city limits, but it's owned and operated by Cal Poly. It's already developed. There's no improvements that are proposed there at this time. It's just a matter of cleaning up city limit lines for that property. So this image is a development plan that Cal Poly submitted for city review as part of the street abandonment and the encroachment permit. This is a plan for their 33 units of faculty and staff housing. We have 14 homes which would front on Slack Street, taking direct access, and then the remaining homes would be accessed from 2 internal streets. Those would complete Graves and Henderson at those intersections. As you can see from this site plan, the improvements are proposed to stop just past Henderson. So it's one property down from Henderson is where they would have 2 houses fronting Slack, and then Cal Poly is proposing to end the frontage improvements at that location. That's also where the abandonment and city limit modification would end. So anything unimproved would stay the way, beyond this line, would stay the way it is now. The city limit line and the right-of-way would stay at the full 70-foot width so that it's preserved for the future if anything ever came in. This is an image of the proposed Slack Street frontage improvements. The red line is where the proposed edge of right-of-way and the new city limit line would be. So the city would keep the pavement itself, the existing parking. Right now there's a very narrow pavement area. It's not quite 2 lanes that's out there right now. So Cal Poly would widen the existing street, install curb, gutter, a landscape parkway, and a sidewalk. And the city, with a proposal is for the city to abandon all of the unused right-of-way and also abandon the sidewalk and parkway so that it can be owned and maintained by Cal Poly. This is a matter of just having Cal Poly have site control of the frontage in front of their property, since it would be mostly used by their residents and their the students of Cal Poly. It's best to go ahead and abandon the line at the edge of the travel lanes. So that's what's in the images in your legal description and the resolution. So this kind of complicated image that you see here is the existing right-of-way and what's proposed. So this green line that we have at the very bottom is the edge of the existing right-of-way. We have a very narrow pavement currently out there. Cal Poly would widen to the red dotted line, which would be the new edge of the pavement. That would also be the edge of the new city limit and the edge of the new right-of-way. Cal Poly would own and maintain the sidewalk and landscape parkway beyond that. This dotted green line that you see above that is the proposed back of sidewalk. And then this proposal is for the city to abandon the unused right-of-way beyond back of sidewalk as well. As you can see from this image, Cal Poly is proposing to install residential units in this area of abandonment. That's because the hill behind these homes that slopes further up the hill is very steep. It would cause additional environmental and aesthetic impacts if they had to push the homes further back up the hill. So this is a way to facilitate the homes being built in an unused area of right-of-way. Helps the project just reduce the environmental impacts. This is the second area of Slack Street that's proposed for abandonment and detachment. This sidewalk was installed about 3 or 4 years ago by Cal Poly. It's on the west side of Grand on Slack, and the proposal is to turn that frontage over to Cal Poly to own and maintain as part of their housing that they installed a few years ago. And this image is the city limit modification on Hathaway. It's one complete parcel. The APN number is shown on the image, and it would move the city limit boundary from the purple dash line that you see up above to the green dash line at the back of the sidewalk. The city would continue to own and maintain the right-of-way in this area. No street abandonment is proposed for this area. It's just city limit cleanup. So one of the things the Planning Commission is being asked tonight is to make a determination of general plan conformity. So city staff has gone through the project proposal and compared it with the general plan land use element, housing element, and circulation element. And there's several policies that support approval of this project. Some of those are that the city shall encourage Cal Poly to develop and maintain faculty and staff housing. The city will encourage Cal Poly to expand on-campus housing at least as fast as enrollment increases to meet existing and future needs. And this is to lessen the pressure on city housing supply and transportation systems. The land use element also says that Cal Poly should fully mitigate impacts to the city, including environmental and quality of life impacts to nearby neighborhoods. The circulation element requires that new development provide sidewalks and assume fair share of responsibility for constructing circulation improvements, and that traffic is reduced or maintain vehicular speeds in residential neighborhoods. So the proposed improvements that Cal Poly has on Slack Street would achieve these goals. Housing is one of the City Council's major city goals for the 2023 to 2025 plan. Housing and homelessness is identified as one of those major goals, and the construction of new staff housing on Cal Poly will provide housing for Cal Poly employees. By abandoning the unused right-of-way, the city can support construction of these housing units at a lower elevation on the property, thereby minimizing the environmental and aesthetic impacts of grading further on the hillside. One of the other things the Planning Commission is asked to consider are future circulation needs. So this is a finding for any street abandonment. It's a finding that the Planning Commission and the City Council will need to make. So Slack Street is designated in the city's general plan as a local residential street, and the proposed frontage improvements that Cal Poly is showing are consistent with city standards. The abandonment of unused portions of Slack Street does not conflict with future circulation needs or future roadway improvements. There is a condition of approval in the resolution that states that a public pedestrian access easement shall be recorded on the sidewalk on the north side of Slack Street, and that is just to preserve future public access at that location. Public utilities are being consulted as part of the street abandonment. The city has sent notices to all public utilities. Easements must be preserved or reserved for public and private utilities. We are working with PG&E, AT&T, and the cable company to make sure that those easements are included prior to abandonment. And as part of the frontage improvements, Cal Poly will be installing the overhead lines underground, and that's up to the area of their proposed project. The council has reviewed this project twice so far. The first was on June 4th this year. Council authorized staff to proceed with processing the detachment application. In order to modify the city's general plan, zoning, or city limits, does require city authorization before staff can process the application. And then in August, City Council reviewed this project at closed session in order to provide staff direction regarding the property transaction. Because the right-of-way has value to it, the City Council needed to identify negotiating parameters. And the direction from City Council is identified here, and Cal Poly has agreed to these terms. So Cal Poly has committed to supporting a future land value offset for city acquisition of land for utilities. So that's in the future at Cal Poly. We know that we need a water reservoir somewhere in Cal Poly in order to continue to provide water in that area. And so we're looking at the land value of the right-of-way as a trade in that case. The second one is that Cal Poly will acknowledge the partnership with the city for the Vista Meadows project. The third is that Cal Poly has agreed to pay the encroachment permit fees, including plan check and inspection related to frontage improvements on Slack Street. And as a educational institution, Cal Poly is normally required to pay encroachment permit fees. In this case, they have agreed to, as a kind of a good faith effort towards the partnership between Cal Poly and the city, that this is a requirement for a city plan check and inspection when we're doing frontage improvements along Slack Street. The fourth is that Cal Poly will install traffic calming, 2 speed humps on Slack Street as part of the encroachment permit for frontage improvements, and that was specifically requested by City Council on June 4th. There is the proposed street right-of-way abandonment and detachment applications are consistent with the environmental review that was previously completed by Cal Poly. So there was a final environmental impact report that was certified in May 2020 by Cal Poly. And then there was an EIR addendum completed in February of this year for the Slack and Grand faculty and staff housing project. So tonight, staff is recommending that that the Planning Commission adopt the draft resolution as shown in your staff report. And staff and the applicant are here if you have questions.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions for staff at this point?
I have questions, but I think if I can, I'll wait till after public comment because they may raise some of the same issues.
Would you like to go ahead?
So in looking at the history of this, I know this is not really on the table, but the previous proposal was for hundreds of units and 5-story buildings. And that would seem to go further towards our general plan goals of establishing more housing. And it just says that it was determined reduced intensity to address site constraints and feasibility concerns. So I guess we don't have much to say about that. It seems a little unfortunate, or maybe a missed opportunity to go from that to single-family housing that is an order of magnitude less housing units. So I'm just noting that for the record. It seems a little unfortunate. And that also, I'm wondering if there was any possibility of having access from Grand Avenue instead of Slack Street it seems like that potentially would avoid impacts along Slack. Was that even considered? And some of this is background stuff, so I know it may not be spot on for this abandonment issue. So I'll stop with that for now.
As far as the kind of how we got to this point, I would probably refer that to Cal Poly, and they can talk about their design process on how they arrived at this spot. But one thing I did want to point out is that the frontage improvements on Slack Street have kind of been developed through a negotiation between the two jurisdictions. When you have a property line that is right between two separate jurisdictions, here we have the state on one side and the city jurisdiction on the other, it can be very difficult to facilitate frontage improvements and public improvements in that area. So the current plan with the homes fronting on Slack Street is really designed to mirror the neighborhood and to achieve those frontage improvements on that portion of the street. It's because the state is a superior agency, they're not necessarily subject to the same standards that a lot of other properties would be subject to. So this is been some back and forth between the city and the state as they've developed their plans.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for that. This APN 052 that's over by the rec center that's being detached now, how long has that been waiting to be cleaned up?
I believe since that area was annexed, so it was probably just either an error on the original annexation, or it could have been a property that Cal Poly acquired at a later date. But LAFCO identified this when we met with them several months ago, and they said if you're already doing a detachment, this is a good candidate to clean up the boundaries.
Okay, so somebody just noticed it on the plans and the maps and so on.
Yes.
Okay, are there other things lurking out there like that?
This is the only one we know of in this area. So
everything else has been cleaned up?
With this, we would have a very clean boundary line between Cal Poly and the city in this location.
Okay, and this effectively shrinks the city a little bit. Are there any tax implications for that whatsoever?
Cal Poly doesn't pay taxes to begin with, so it won't really have any impact.
Okay. The land beyond Vista Meadows is also state land owned by Cal Poly, right? Is there any talk about trails or further development beyond the development that we're looking at right here?
I would refer that one to the applicant.
Okay. Will on-street parking be allowed on Slack on both sides or either side or neither side?
On the south side where it's existing. So I can, is it still reflecting this PowerPoint
Yeah,
on your
we're seeing
screens?
it fine.
So this street section shows you Slack Street. An 8-foot parking area on the south side of Slack Street would remain no on-street parking on the north side.
Okay, so the north side will have no parking signage there, and it will not be allowed.
Yes.
And then I think it was 2 parking spots per single-family residence, plus the driveways. Is that the way that's working out?
It would be 2 parking spots in the garage, so they all have 2-car garages, and then there's, I believe there's also room for parking in the driveway, so it looks like they have about 18-foot driveways as well.
Great. And could you clarify for those of us who might not be up on this, difference between right-of-way and ownership and easements?
Yes, that's, I actually might refer that one to our Public Works Director who's here as well. But the ownership it's basically, we had to do a lot of research on the old records in order to get to this point. We had to see where the existing city limits are and who owns that right-of-way. So the right-of-way was established in the late 1800s with a map that basically created that right-of-way. The property owners on each side own to the center line of the street. So Cal Poly owns to the center line of Slack Street, but there's a 70-foot right-of-way that overlays that. It's basically just a public access easement.
Okay, so it is like an easement then. And, okay. And then what about other streets in the city like Churro Street? Do we own that street, or because I live on a street that I know my property line goes to the curb, or approximately, and then the city, I think, owns the street. Is that how it usually works?
Oh, hi. Matt Horn, Public Works Director. It's it's a mixture of different land ownerships we have for our public right-of-way. So predominantly, we have all of our roadways in easement. So the adjoining property owners own to the center line of the street typically. We do have some that are in fee title, so there's a legal parcel for some of the roadways. Predominantly, we prefer to have it as easement because there's it's easier to vacate, remove, abandon that way. So it provides the city more flexibility with all the existing uses and rights of having it in fee title. To Choro Street, we have an old city, and so a lot of our maps where you'll see land was divided by just using a map and very little verbiage or words associated with it. Those are construed to be in easement and not in fee title. So predominantly we have easement. Does that
Okay.
help?
Easement and right-of-way really meaning almost the same thing or exactly the same thing?
Right-of-way means the area of the street, basically from back of sidewalk to back of sidewalk and the roadway in between. Easement or fee title is the ownership or the instrument in which we transfer it back and forth. So right-of-way is one thing. The easement or fee title is the mechanism in which we have the right to have a roadway there.
So if I understand it right, then the right-of-way is something that we've just kind of declared, and the easement is maybe the legal embodiment of that?
The right-of-way is an area that's been declared on a map or shown on a map and offered for dedication from the owner to the city in perpetuity. So the instrument is either an easement or a deed.
Okay, and that's what we're giving up here, or planning to?
We're giving up an easement.
Right, okay. Clear? Does everybody get that? Okay, it's a little tricky, all right. Traffic calming, we have 2 humps proposed somewhere along Slack Street. Can somebody tell me the difference between a hump and a bump? One of my students at Cal Poly actually asked this the other day, and I was like, I don't know.
Basically, speed bumps are what you see in a parking lot, very short, and it has a very dramatic effect when you go over it. Speed humps are about the same elevation, but they have a wider width, so it's easier to go over. And speed tables, the third type of instrument we use, are basically like humps, but even longer, but there's a flat part. And there's actually a fourth one too called a speed cushion, which is like a hump, but it has travel ways for larger vehicles like fire engines to go through them at a higher rate of speed. So there's a lot of different instruments.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and then we did have the public comment, and so we're all gonna be curious about that and what's gonna happen to the rest of Slack Street going down to the end, and how do we deal with this turnaround, lost drivers and delivery trucks and whatnot. So that's definitely gonna be of interest to us. So I think that's what you were deferring to as well. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I also have a terminology question, just to make sure I understand it. When is the term abandonment used and when is the term detachment used?
They're really 2 very different types of application. So abandonment it's a street abandonment, or sometimes it's referred to as a road abandonment, and that's basically we're giving up the right of way. The city would only be abandoning that easement, or in the case that that Matt described, it could be like a fee title. So it just has to do with city right of way.
But not the city limits.
City limit is something that's actually very different, and it's the jurisdiction of the city. So it's the area that the city basically has, where people have to, homeowners would have to come and get permits, or it would come to planning commission or city council is within the city's jurisdiction. When you go outside city jurisdiction, that's in the county. This one gets confusing because the state owns the land, so it's not necessarily just county jurisdiction. The state is a superior agency that issues themselves permits. They kind of follow their own rules. So it's another layer on this one that makes it a little bit more confusing.
So is it correct to say that detachment changes the city limit boundaries, but abandonment does not?
Yes,
Okay,
that's correct.
thank you.
And that's why we have both in this situation, because we want to make sure those lines coincide.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions for staff before we move along? Go ahead.
I just wondered, since construction is occurring there, well, I don't know if construction is, but certainly grading is, it's hard to see because the fence is screened with cloth. But none of that activity is prohibited by anything we haven't done yet, or is that clear?
That's correct. Cal Poly is doing the improvements on their land. They do have an encroachment permit that shows the frontage improvements to city standard. The question before the Planning Commission tonight is regarding the boundary of the right-of-way and
Not
attachment.
the encroachment permit.
So they can continue to, whether or not the city abandons the land, they can still build their project. The question is, can they build the homes that as they were proposing in this particular location on the frontage? So that's the part that's within the city's jurisdiction.
All right, if there are no further questions of staff at this time, we will move on to,
Can I ask one more?
sure.
So the section diagram of the street right-of-way, I think it added up to just about 40 feet, not 70 feet. And so I was trying to figure out what the deal is with that.
Yes, a local residential street typically is not developed at 70 feet in width. The right-of-way was dedicated in the late 1800s, and they wanted to preserve as much right-of-way as they could possibly need. On the west side of Grand Avenue, there is a much wider right-of-way. That's in front of the school, and it has a lot more traffic. But on this side, in front of the residential units, there's no need for 70-foot right-of-way in that location. It's about 40, 45 feet total that's actually being developed with frontage improvements.
So what's the resulting width of our right-of-way after all this is done, assuming we do it?
Let's see. So the city would, this one's a little bit different because we're giving the sidewalk and the landscaped parkway to Cal Poly. So it's frontage improvements are being developed, but the city's not going to own and maintain them. So it's a little bit different than other streets in the city. It would be 28 feet that the city's maintaining for the existing parking and the two 10-foot travel lanes. And then we would have city right-of-way. Beyond that, we would have a curb, a landscape, and a sidewalk that is developed frontage, but it would be owned and maintained by Cal Poly.
So we're going to end up with 28 minus a couple feet or something? Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Is the width of each lane the same from center line, north and south? Because it's probably an optical illusion, but the edge of pavement is there, and it looks like that side might be narrower. Just curious.
Hi, I'm Matt Horn, Public Works Director. The intent is to have the two 10-foot equal travel lanes going in opposite direction and one 8-foot parking lane. The red line on the exhibit right there delineates ownership of portions of the right-of-way. So the roadway is going to feel and act like a little bit wider than it actually is. It will feel and look wider, and the city will own a portion of that, and Cal Poly will own a portion of that. So you'll have 28 feet of like active roadway area plus the sidewalk on the southerly side. And then you'll have about 2 feet-ish of curb and gutter on the Cal Poly side, a parkway, and then a 5-foot sidewalk.
So Cal Poly owns the curb and gutter, but the city
Owns
is
the
up to
road.
the curb and gutter.
Actually, right, it's a little complicated. It's like, so the diagram goes right between the concrete and the asphalt. So the gray stuff and the black stuff.
That's the gutter.
That's the gutter right
Yeah.
there. So the start of the gutter is where the city will own to.
Thank you.
Problem.
I don't see the word bike lane anywhere. Or is there any thought about how bicycles might travel down Slack Street with all this new housing?
Well, really, the intent is for bicycles to use the 28-foot travelway just like vehicles would. Really, it's the volume of vehicles that we're anticipating in this portion of Slack Street is not large, and the benefit of keeping the right-of-way, the travelway smaller, creates frictional issues and keeps speeds lower. So we think that we have a pretty conservative design here for Slack Street to keep vehicles, the vehicle speed down and just have the right balance of roadway usage and volume. So that's really the intent. So the bicycles would use the travel lanes.
Okay.
All right, intermediate last call for questions. All right, thank you very much. And now, if the applicant would like, they have up to 10 minutes to make a presentation. Are you going to pull up the slides, Kelly? Thanks. Thanks. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
My name's Mike McCormick. I'm the Vice President for Facilities Management and Development at Cal Poly. And I first want to just thank you for taking the time to do this. It's a kind of a complicated issue, as you can see. And I also just want to thank you for what you do. I did that for 20 years in another city, and I understand the dedication that this takes. So I really appreciate it. Compliments also to the staff. We've been working really closely with staff on this, and as you can imagine, working through the complexities of both the conditions of the site and the way it interfaces with the neighborhood take a lot of partnership. And so I just want to recognize that it's been a really great relationship and partnership with them. So again, thank you for that partnership. I want to talk a little bit about just some of the background behind Vista Meadows. You guys are asking a couple of really good questions, and I want to try to make sure that I address those. This is part of our effort to, really address housing in the city. But this is only a small part of what we're doing. So, this is only 33 units. Yes, we would have loved to have more units. So we're already working on a third phase of faculty and staff housing. We already have 70 units at Bahia, Montana. This will get us up above 100. We're looking at other sites on our property that we can cleanly develop for hopefully a couple hundred more after that. We're also working on, it's in fact under construction, 4,000 units of student housing. And so at the end of that project, we will have, even though our enrollment will be at its peak, in our history, we'll have less students living in the community than we ever had. At least for 50 years or so. And so we're really taking seriously this issue of trying to create as much housing in the city or on our lands so that we can address the affordability issue. And so this is a small part of that. And so that's really the kind of background for this. Cal, if you want to just go to the next one. As you noted, our master plan included, aspirations, I would say, for a lot more units on this property. And we did a lot of geotechnical work in the area. You can go to the next slide too. We did a lot of geotechnical work in the area and found that there are significant landslides up in the steep part of the hill. And there are many places where the rock is, a couple of feet below the surface, and they were just not, it's just not developable, period. And let alone at an affordable cost. And so we abandoned a lot of the uphill areas. That includes even to the end of Slack Street. So, we ideally would have loved to have had houses running the whole length of Slack Street, but the grade rises pretty quickly up towards the back there. And there's rock very close below the surface up there. That's in fact why in hindsight, that's kind of why the hump is there, but we don't know that until we start poking a lot of holes in the site. This is a more colorful rendering of it. So as we understood that we were going to have a lot less density here than we had planned, just simply because of the geotechnical constraints, we started to work with the city to figure out, well, how can we make this an extension of the existing neighborhood as opposed to a neighborhood that perhaps you enter in from campus side and one that would turn its back on the neighborhoods. And so we really intentionally turned it around so that it's facing Slack Street. We're simply extending Henderson and Graves so that it can feel more part of the neighborhood as opposed to something separate that's sitting there. And I think that's going to benefit the overall neighborhood, and certainly it's going to make it more pleasant for the people that are living in these units. These are being developed as you know, we are developing these, so there's no P3 aspect to this at all. The Cal Poly Partners, our auxiliary corporation, is actually managing the contracts, and there'd be a ground lease to the Cal Poly Partners, who will then sell the units to individual faculty and staff that buy them. So it's, and we have a finance, and we're also providing financing that will allow faculty and staff to buy these units without any down payment. So we're actually backstopping the down payment as well. So there'll be essentially 2 mortgages on each one of them. And so that really starts to lower the affordability. But the biggest lever we have in terms of affordability, because 100% of all of the costs that we incur go into the cost of the house. And, you know, guess what? That makes it pretty close to what the market is. So we're hoping to keep these, you know, 10 to 15% below market. But the biggest lever we have is we cap the appreciation and the resale. And so when people, you know, move on from Cal Poly and want to sell this, we cap the appreciation that to something that's more related to the CPI as opposed to the real estate escalation. And that, in the case of Bay of Montana, that's allowed us to really dramatically reduce the appreciation on the houses, so that we have some of those are selling at this point at like 50% of the market value. So that's the big lever that we have. It's but you know, the rest of it, all of the cost that's being incurred by this goes into the cost of the house. There's no profit. There's no private developer involved or anything with that. Callie, is there one more? And again, the next image is really just that what we're doing is trying to, and again, just trying to extend the feeling of the neighborhood that's there, the existing neighborhood. And so, you know, we've worked really hard to have the character be very similar to the neighborhood. These are smaller houses, but they're 3 bedrooms. They have 2-car garages, so it's you know, very livable. And the idea is to have faculty and staff land here. And you know, make this their home. We have a waterfall in priorities as we sell this, and so top of that would be people in Bay of Montana. We're offering some of those that can move out of the townhouses in Bay of Montana into larger houses here. That opens up even more affordable units in Bay of Montana. Then it will go to, you know, new faculty and staff. Then it goes, and there's a priority scale that goes all the way down. It includes city employees, and then eventually the public at large. And the idea is that this is not students, and so they're not included in that waterfall. So that's so there's, I heard mention of students using the sidewalk, and we don't anticipate very many students over here using the sidewalk at all. Trying to think of any other things that I need to cover. Did I cover all the questions that you guys had?
You know, I think we might, when you're finished and you certainly have a little more time, we might move on to public comment and listen to that, and we may have some additional questions for you after that.
Absolutely. I would be absolutely willing to do that. Yes. Okay. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. So let's move on to public comment. City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
Once again, Chair, I haven't received any speaker slips. If there's someone in the audience that wants to speak on this item, please make it known. Okay, sir, could you please come forward and fill out a speaker slip and announce your name? And if anybody else in the audience wants to speak, please do fill out the slip.
Sure, yeah, while we're waiting, if you have a question, go ahead.
Your name again, sir, from Cal Poly? Mike McCormick, thanks. So I was going to ask about house design, but you showed that image towards the end. So that looks to me a lot of what we're seeing like at Rigetti and Avila Ranch and some of the newer designs. So that was, I think, comforting to see, and you're attempting to blend in with the neighborhood, I suppose. I noticed you have the garage forward design, right? Mm-hmm. Was there any thought to like having alleys like they have at Avila Ranch and getting the cars and the garage doors off the street face? That creates a different look and a different feel. And as far as the sidewalks, and I was asking about bikes, but plenty of faculty ride bikes to work too.
Absolutely.
And so, okay, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, so we actually did look at, we as you can imagine, we looked at many iterations of what the best layout for this would be. And what happens if we access the houses from the back, there were really significant grading problems, and that goes with the idea that there's rock just a couple feet
I
below in
went up and
some
looked at that,
cases.
the site, and you
Yeah.
got a real,
Yeah, and so we will end up with some retaining walls in the backyards of most of those houses, because we're trying to, have those houses sit on the street comfortably, but then deal with the grade change. And so we'll end up with in some cases, some reasonably high retaining walls in the back. And so we just couldn't figure out how to do that from a grading perspective.
okay, fair enough. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. And now we'll return to public comment whenever you're ready, sir.
Yes, Chair, we have Donley Winger.
Yes, my name is Donnelly Winger. I've lived on Hayes Street, which is one block down from Slack Street, for 60 years, so I've seen a lot of changes. When I moved there, it was very much a workforce housing area. Lots of Cal Poly faculty lived, including myself, 38 years there. I know that the initial proposal for the 400-unit, 5-story buildings were not very popular with most of our local residents there, so this is certainly an improvement. I think it'll fit in much better. I don't really have any major comments, except I assume the city's still going to clean the street. Is that right?
We can ask staff about that when you're finished.
Okay.
Thanks.
I mean, the street will be in the city street, but the gutter will be the Cal Poly's. Is that correct? So I noticed that the extension of the new surfacing is going to extend only 2 houses up on Slack Street. Is there any future plans to develop anything that would require that street be extended further up? I'm curious on that score. I'm not sure who could answer this, but maybe the Cal Poly people.
We did receive some correspondence at that point, and so we do intend to ask that question as well, sir.
Okay. Anyway, that's about it. I had some questions, but most of them were covered in the discussion, and I did read the report, and I think it looks like a pretty good project. So we're much more happy with this one than the 5 stories buildings across there. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And I take it we don't have any more slips?
No, Chair, we do not.
All right, so last call for public comment, if anyone would like to speak on this. Okay, seeing none, I am going to close public comment, and now we have time for additional commission questions for staff or the applicant.
I see fire is in the audience. I just wondered about fire service and whether a turnaround should be at the end of Slack.
My name's Kim Rapp. I'm the fire marshal for City of SLO. SLO City Fire, I believe, did request upgrades. It would be a nice to have, but since it's an existing road, we can't necessarily require the city to do that. And that's basically all I know about it. We'll regulate the new installations and the roads on Cal Poly site, since SLO City Fire does access and water for there. We've looked at those roads and helped come up with the appropriate turnarounds for that. But as far as the existing roadway, it's a public road. We don't regulate that part of it. We did say it would be a nice to have, but when it comes to the city standards and such,
Who provides fire service for Cal Poly? Do they have their own fire service?
we are the first responding
And
engine.
can I ask you to use the mic too
Oh.
for the recording?
Oh my
and
gosh,
for the
sorry.
Streaming?
This is my first time doing this, so it's on. Okay. I'm sorry, what was your question again?
Who provides fire protection on Cal Poly property?
I believe we're the first responding engine companies, but Cal Poly or State Fire Marshal does all of the inspections and other part of the fire service. But if there is any incidents that go beyond our capacities, then State Fire Marshal will get called in on other things beyond response.
Because if the road Slack Street was considered adequate for the existing housing, but suddenly you're adding additional homes off of, on Cal Poly property, but
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
servicing them.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
want to make sure your fire truck can turn around.
So we would be mostly concerned about the roads that are being installed there. And as long as we have the appropriate turn radii to get into there and out of there and around on that location and out, we're not losing anything per se for fire. We're getting the better access on the new housing itself. But as far as going down further, again, fire requested, it would be a nice to have, but just based on policies and such, that it's not anything we can require beyond a nice to have.
Okay, thank you. I hope Cal Poly was listening to the nice to have if they could provide, but I also heard that that was steep as you get to the end and there may not be room or.
Yes,
easy
ma'am.
going.
I know there's a pretty severe grade and slope, and for us to get the appropriate turnaround, you would have to have, I think it's some crazy high retaining wall, and to get the appropriate dimensions for the most demanding apparatus, I don't believe the size would fit there with the current conditions.
What did the city ask for?
I am not aware of that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Also, I was concerned, parking didn't come up as an issue, so maybe it isn't, but I thought it would be a good idea to have parking on the north side as well. But I guess there's probably just not room, or you're really pushing back into that area. But, and that's not a fire question,
Okay.
sorry.
Come on, Kim, get that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, Matt, Public Works Director again. Yeah, parking's an issue in this area of the city. Slack Street's narrow. Really, we're kind of caught in a quandary. So we could, widen the road, increase the overall project expense, and provide a certain number of parking spaces on Slack Street. But also that would drive up project cost and then make these homes less affordable than they will be. So we had that proposal in our mind. Ultimately, the city has a parking district up there. We manage the parking in that way. The several parking spaces that this project could provide, I'm not sure if the cost benefit would really pencil out. And just the overall improvements to Slack Street, I think Callie had some numbers we were talking about earlier, but I believe we're improving 900 feet of the overall 1,100 feet of Slack Street, making it better than it is right now. And so that'll be better for bike, ped, bicycle, and fire access through the area. We had our transportation engineers look at it, and they've looked at all the backing distances and maneuverability, and it's a better situation than it is right now.
Okay, thank you. Why not continue the detachment to the edge of Cal Poly's property, since you mentioned you like straight lines?
In that case, we're not abandoning or detaching anything that's unimproved. So we're only abandoning areas with sidewalk and improved frontage. So any areas that are remaining as existing, either on the far east side of Slack or the far west side, like where it curves into Longview, the city's going to maintain control of those so that we can ensure frontage improvements in the future meet city standards.
Okay, and you wouldn't want to require that sidewalk to extend to the end, or for Cal Poly to put those improvements in now?
It was part of the negotiations with Cal Poly. We have expressed interest in having it improved all the way to the end of Slack. Because of the slope in that location, Cal Poly has stated that it's not feasible and it's not in their proposal. So it's one of those items where it was just part of a negotiation back and forth. Council did have their key points that they wanted to see with the project, and extension to the end of Slack Street was not one of those.
Okay. I think that's it. I would just quickly comment on the driveways, because I'm an affordable housing developer, and it seems like in every jurisdiction I go into, I can't get away with 18-foot driveways. It's 20 to 24. They say people have big F-150s, but I'm thinking the average size car, is less than 18 feet and would be adequately parked. Just a comment.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we had this public comment. I'd like to tackle it head on. We've kind of danced around it a little bit, but is there, is this news to you, Mr. McCormick, that there's desire to improve all the way to the end of Slack Street, that there's this issue with access and people getting lost and trying to turn around and they can't turn around and the street's too narrow? And is there, was there any consideration of trying to fold that sort of, I mean, we're going to be out there with heavy equipment, we're pouring concrete and we're doing sidewalks and gutters. It seems like an opportunity to fix up, and if nothing else, at least some signage that makes it really clear, don't go down here. It's not the delivery point for anything. This is not the construction material, whatever. So what do we know about that?
Absolutely to signage. That's the least we can do, right? And so we actually did look at that. And like I said, the grade, if you go out on the site, you can see that the road kind of goes like this and the grade keeps going like this. There's a pretty significant separation very quick. And like I said, that's rock. That's why that happened. And so the expense to do that, just to burden, the 33 houses, we're really conscious of it. We only have 33 units now to spread this cost across the board. It didn't seem for us to be worth it to cover that last 200 feet with an existing condition like that. And to create a turnaround to, as you heard from the fire department, to create a turnaround that could adequately accommodate a truck would create a significant cut into that hill where the rock is. And so absolutely to signage, things like that, but we did actually, we're aware of the request and we did look into that, and it's a pretty expensive endeavor for us to do that as part of it, even though we have equipment out there.
Okay, thanks. Then I'll turn to our city public works and ask, is this just like a little end of the road problem that the type of which exists perhaps in other places in the city and is on some kind of list to maybe get fixed up someday, or even a little wider road? And the thing before us right now is the right-of-way issue and the abandonment of it. So we're not, whether to improve Slack Street is not really our question, but it is coming up because it's part of this whole thing.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it's associated with the project, and honestly, if there wasn't a development associated with it or abandonment, this would just be an encroachment permit that would have been approved over our counter. So the encroachment, the improvements that are happening on Slack Street, the 900 feet, they're excellent. They're great. We're super happy to have them. The additional 200 feet. It's not something that we would likely jump in and do with this project or shortly thereafter. The only thing I can really offer to the community right now is we are going through the 25-27 financial plan process, in which we put together all the different improvements that we'd like to make to the city and kind of have the community help us select our path forward in the next couple of years. That would be the ideal time if this section of Slack Street rose to the level of funding and implementation. As Cal Poly indicated, it's not an insignificant cost to do that bit of work given the current geometry and slopes that are out there. So there's some value there. And the only thing I can really offer up to is one more thing is Slack Street, the pavement condition is, it will be improved with the Cal Poly's project, but after Cal Poly is complete, we will also go in 2026 and do some roadway maintenance as well. So that's on our plan, but widening and additional sidewalk work is not.
Can you confirm that we will still sweep the street?
Oh, yes. Yes, we will still sweep the street. We'll do our normal maintenance activities. Really, the red line or the change in ownership there is more about liability and claims when something happens.
Okay, thanks. And just a comment that this cake is pretty baked and it's in the oven and the development's happening, but if there had been higher density in 5 stories, I think it would have ended up being a little bit like what's right across the street for the new student housing there, and that sort of density with open space around it. So it wasn't too hard for me to picture that, particularly if we could have had access from Grant somehow. But anyway, that's not really on the agenda here, so I'll stop now.
And I just had one kind of related question. I know part of this project involves some traffic calming efforts on Slack, and kind of implicit in the letter that we received, the one piece of correspondence on this was that they seem to believe that traffic on Slack has increased recently, even prior to this development. Is there objective evidence of that? Either way?
I don't have any objective evidence of traffic increasing. There's been construction activities in and around the area, so that could be related. Really, the traffic, the speeds that we're seeing out there and the volumes that we're seeing aren't at an actionable level that typically would implement like a neighborhood traffic management project. Typically, we would allow this project to move forward, monitor the street. If its speeds increased, then we would do our traffic management tools there. But Cal Poly has been willing to install those now and showed that definitely will help with speed.
All right, thank you.
Follow up on parking. I assume this is all permit parking up there. Is that right? So residential parking, they get a sticker or a card or whatever?
Correct, yeah, it's a preferential parking district.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant?
One last question for Callie. Just the detachment line looks so crooked. Why is that? Again, why wouldn't it be straight on that detachment? Not on your slides, but on what the staff report. Attachment.
Yes, in the legal description, it is very particular, and it just has to do with what the city is going to maintain versus what Cal Poly is going to maintain. So we were very technical, and we went right along that line about what the city wants to keep ownership of versus Cal Poly, and the surveyor wrote that into the legal description.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, last call for questions for staff or the applicant. All right, thank you very much. All right, anyone have any deliberative comments or anyone want to offer a motion?
Sure, I'll move to support the detachments and all of this. Do I need to be more specific about it?
I don't
Following
believe
the
so. I
staff
think that
recommendation?
covers it.
I would quickly say it's really easy to see a tremendous amount of work has gone into this over a good period of time, certainly from city staff and from the city council and also from Cal Poly. And all in all, we can see some of the trade-offs, but there'll be some big improvements here. And it's good to see that housing going in and not looming over the neighborhood. I think I'm glad to see that.
All right, do we have a second or any other comments?
I'll go for a second on the motion by Jorgensen.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Last call for any further deliberation before I call for a vote. All right, hearing none, will the Deputy City Clerk please call the roll of the motion?
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Aye.
Vice Chair Houghton,
Aye.
Commissioner Flores,
Aye.
Chair Cooley,
Aye.
and that motion passes.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so we've moved to the final item on our agenda, the staff updates and agenda forecast. Would Community Development Director Tyler Corey please provide us with an update?
All right, well, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. Just looking out on the agenda forecast, our next regularly scheduled meeting of October 9th. We don't have any items, so presuming that meeting will be canceled. The second meeting in October is the 23rd, and we do have one item at this time, and we're looking at bringing forward some changes to our accessory dwelling unit ordinance to be more in alignment with some of the recent changes to state law. So you'll see that coming before you on the 23rd. And then the next meeting after that is out in November, which would be on November 13th. And right now, we have a couple tentative items, but I'm not sure what that agenda is going to look like just yet.
Any questions for Tyler before we wrap this up? All right. The next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled for October 9th, 2024, although we're hearing that's likely to be canceled, at 6 p.m. in the council chambers at City Hall, 990 Palm Street, San Luis Obispo. And with that, we are adjourned.